Hi, I'm Mary Gunn. Welcome to Fun University.
Mary Gunn Fun, founder and head professor of Fun University. Fundamentals, Fussy Cutting. Take 3. Buttons are my nemesis. They are my nemesis. Welcome to a Fundamentals based on fussy cutting. If you don't know what fussy cutting is, you may want to stick around. If you think you don't know enough about fussy cutting, you may want to stick around. I have a whole layout here of ideas to give you tonight. And this was all because a patron asked about fussy cutting. Apparently I had mentioned it in a video, have no idea when, and said I was going to make a video on it. So I'm glad you asked, Mara, and we get this out for you. So let's go down to paper and get this bad boy started, shall we? Fussy cutting is simply cutting images out, more detailed images with usually a scissors, craft knife, but sometimes with a little tiny trimmer. The reason I say trimmer, sometimes you can get some longer cuts to get, if you have some die cuts or something that have nice straight lines, you can use this. You can also use this to get some pieces down to a smaller, more workable size for something along these lines. A craft knife is always handy. I know a lot of people don't feel like they're very good at craft knives, but the amount that you're going to be using them for fussy cutting, as far as I'm going to introduce you to, is pretty minimal and pretty darn helpful. So I would have one, but I'd be very careful with it. Some longer bladed scissors. Look how dirty mine are. Yes. Longer bladed scissors are handy for some big bulk kind of cutting to get to the fussy cutting. The fussy cutting itself is really great with some smaller scissors. I know that people have even used little cuticle scissors, like fingernail scissors, in the past. Grandma Gay was talking about how she did it 30 years ago with fabric. So something really sharp is excellent. Something that is comfortable to your grip is even better. And something that you feel very comfortable with. I don't think they need to be super tiny little things. When you do cut, you're going to be cutting with longer strokes as you can, and you're going to want to put your little cut part right here. You're not going to be cutting toward the piece, toward the edge as much. Well, instead of just going like, oh, we'll cut around here like this, you're going to be going clear into that little crevice or that little crease and then going out like that. Not this, because you're going to get little chunky things then. You're going to get little angles. But if you go like this, you'll get a smoother cut. This is one of the hardest things in the world, is a circle. So I just happened to grab it. So those are the tools that you're going to want to keep on hand. What kind of things are you going to want to be able to, can you cut out for fussy cutting? Are you ready? This is a long list. I'm going to read it. Fabric, pattern paper, stamped images, die cuts, stickers, magazines, catalogs, letters, photos, ephemera, Xerox images, digital printables, drawn images, and stenciled images, and probably a whole bunch more. But you can fussy cut them all out for whatever purposes you want. Why would you not have a die for these little projects that we're going to talk about tonight? Because dies are very specific and can get very costly. So this is a skill that will save you money. That's always good. It will cost the investment of a good pair of scissors, which is something you should have anyway. Do hide it from everybody and update them regularly, or sharpen them, because paper does tend to dull scissors. So you would want to do it for detailed embellishments where you don't have any dies. It does save money. You can cut off borders. You can get things that are too big, a little smaller. You can give little intricate, some really pretty intricate little things, which I don't do because I'm not a technician. I try really hard to keep my attention on what I'm working on. And oftentimes, if it's hard and tedious, I'll see a squirrel. So something that you can make very, very incredible little detailed things. Look up cut work if you'd like. And you can see tablecloths and all sorts of things that people used to do by cutting out fabric. It's just phenomenal. It is not me. Here's a couple quick tips that you might want to remember. Hold the paper in your non-dominant hand. I am a right-handed person, so I hold my scissors in my right hand. If I were to try, I can't even cut paper with my left hand. My hand doesn't work. It doesn't squeeze right. So hold the paper in your non-dominant hand. You're going to want to move your paper, not your scissors. Let's go back to this ornery old circle. So here's my non-dominant hand. Here's my dominant hand. We're going to be moving the paper, not the scissors. If we move the scissors, our arm gets a workout, and you might give yourself a strain. So don't do that, and you'll have better control as that way too. Longer strokes when possible. Cut bulk off to get to your project. If you have a project that's in the middle of a bunch of other papers, cut it off so that you only have this smaller area to work with. So much easier to contain and hold when you've cut the bulk off. Thinner cardstock is easier than thick. Like a thick media, mixed media or watercolor is a harder paper to cut for fussy cutting. Just keep it in mind while you are practicing. You might want to give yourself a break and give yourself a little thinner cardstock to work with. Hold your scissors at an angle. Let me show you something. I promise I'm more prepared than this. This was just the very beginning. If you hold your scissors like this, you can see where they're cutting. If you hold it like this, you've blocked your view from what is actually going to be in front of you sometimes. So hold your scissors at a little bit of an angle if you are wanting to see where you're going. I think you can see, I'm not going to make a big fuss over this, but you can see a little better with them at a little tiny angle. Just a thought. There we go. Trim first. Sometimes the first cut fussy cut around whatever you're working on may not be your best. So then just trim first. Don't get all hung up with, oh, I made a mistake. Just trim first and then go back and clean it up. There are ways to clean up fussy cutting. So chill. Don't freak. We don't need any freakouts here. You've got something sharp in your hand, so stay cool, okay? All right, good. Here's some things, very simple things that I think will help you just to get started. One of the most common things that we fussy cut is a notch. I know, I think everybody knows how to do this, but you find the center of a little piece of paper, trim right up the center, go from the outside corner pointing right toward that little cut edge. You can't, if you don't cut clear to that very top, you can flip that over sometimes and use it as a guide, or you can rip it and not do a very good job. And then you can just aim again. See, I really am not a technician. And you know, nobody has ever sent my cards back and said, no, thank you. Delivery not accepted because you didn't fussy cut right. Okay, so there's a notch. We use these all the time in card making and scrapbooking. It's always a good thing. And ribbons for presents and things like that, always a good thing. These are my tag top templates. Yes, these are triple T tag top templates. All they are different angles of tops so that I don't have to worry about cutting uneven tag tops. I also have them in with numbers. Look, an inch. This went from here to here was an inch. We have the 3/4 to an inch. I'm not even sure what that means. And then we also have another acetate thing. What I mean by that is you can just put this little guy right here on the top of a tag, an unmade tag, a tag in its embryonic stage. Just trim it off. We used to, and sometimes still do, take that, flip it over. Sometimes I put a little piece of glue right under there and then cut it. But if you have a tag top template, you can just line up the edges once again. Use that edge, for your template, and you've got a perfect tag every time. Super simple sample of a tag top topper template for fussy cutting. And off you guys go back to your places. All right, another thing that you might want to be able to use your fussy cutting skills with are die cuts or cut-aparts. I took this off and stuck it in my to make you use someday file. This was from the front of a paper pad from Michael's, and I thought summer road trip, surely I can use that somewhere on a scrapbook page or something. So I will be able to have this. This would be one of those things that you could trim up with a little trimmer, because it's nice and straight. It's not exactly fussy cutting, but it would be stinking fussy cutting if you use scissors. Since these are a little bit longer, another way to do it if you don't have a trimmer would be with some longer blades. But now I'll be ready for summer. Another example of using a trimmer is a die cut that's stuck together right next door to each other. And instead of using a scissors, just trimming it with a little trimmer. And then you'll have a couple faster and more furiously, and it will be lovely, and you'll be happier, and the bugs won't eat you alive. No, the bugs' bites won't itch as much. Nothing will be wrong. Here's another sample. You can cut these out along the lines with something like this. A long blade would be better. Or and then trim it up with something like this. It's a process. It's not always a one-stop kind of thing. And there you have a cute little thing. But you often get little cut-apart kind of things in these little sets. You can also cut out pattern paper, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. Sometimes, well, I, at least, maybe not you, but I die cut something and I don't die cut it perfectly. And so that you can see, this is much closer than this edge. So perhaps I should like to correct my die cut, and perhaps I would like to have it right on that black line also. You can do that. This one is such a simple shape, and the line is fairly fat. So it's not too terribly hard with my angled scissors and short, longer strokes at the base of the scissors to do that very thing. And it will clean that right up. Something to consider if you want a die cut to have an edge on it is your background. Do you need a white mat underneath it, or do you want it to be directly placed without a mat on your project? We're going to talk about that more too here in a little bit. But there's your corrected die cut. Another quick tip for that, if you do have a die and you keep it with your stamp set, like I do on the very specific ones, not on the general ones, but the specific ones, make a little note on the front of your stamp set so that you remember, not that anybody at this desk would forget, but so that you will remember you have the die, because that may be a difference maker too. Oh, look at this little mess. Die cutting, or just fussy cutting off my little chewed up corner there. Anyway, just make a little note, simple garage sale sticker or something bright that you will be able to go, oh, I've got a die for this. I'm good. I will use that. Because sometimes you forget. Didn't that look like it could be a fishbowl? Yeah. Alrighty. Stickers. Fussy cut stickers, what the heck? Yeah, you can fussy cut stickers, especially when they have like a white edge around them. And if you don't want that white edge around them, or you want to use part of this sticker instead of the whole thing, you can fussy cut them. Here's a couple tips. You can either pat this down with an anti-static powder or some cornstarch. Or you can stick it on some copy paper and cut it from there. You still have glue, right? You can still use some glue to finish this thing off and put it on a project. This is what I mean about cutting the bulk away. Say you didn't want that little white edge to be as prominent, you can just trim that right up. You could also trim right to that blue image. It's always good to cut off stuff that you've already cut out too. Moving the paper, using the base of the scissors. And you're going to have something that you want to work with. So you wanted to pop that center piece up on some foam tape. You're not going to be able to do that unless you fussy cut. I'm just trimming off the bigger edge. So I have a thinner edge. I'm going around it first, and then I'll look at it again to see if I need to clean it up. And then say if you did want to do this part, you could just cut it off right along that blue line. Oh, let's try. Let's just go right in here. It is much better for me not to have my paper on my left. So, like for my scissors to be on the left side, very, very uncomfortable. So I always try to keep my scissors on the right side of the project. I don't know what left-handed people do. I'm sorry. You can leave that in the comments for our experienced lefties. So now you would have something along this line. You could pop this up. And you would have a real different look with a little bit of dimension. Cool, huh? So you can cut stickers. Perhaps this little love sticker, you would like to work with this and make it separate letters. You can do that. It would take fussy cutting. Perhaps you would like to use these letters, the negative space, to put some more paper underneath and use that on a layout. It might take some fussy cutting, but fussy cutting you can do. You can just go along, follow the shape of the letter, leaving a little border, or cutting right on the edge of the black. I didn't cut off the bulk, did I? It's getting a little harder. But you can see how you can do that. And then you get twice as much out of your stickers. All right, so you can do die cuts. You can do paper. We're going to talk more about paper here in a minute. You can do notches and have a tag top template. You can do stickers, and you can do stamped images. Okay, so on this little guy, I have stamped a pretty little cup with not a very thick line, but it's a simple line without too many terrible details on here. And I'm just gonna slow yourself down when you do this too. This is not a good, oh, I gotta be there in 5 minutes and I need to fussy cut this entire huge project. It's not that kind of skill. It's a slow yourself down. I'm gonna see there's one. I'm gonna come back and clean that up because I have left a little bit of outside paper. But right now it's gonna be hard to do. So I'm gonna come back when it's a little easier. I'm trying to cut right in along or inside that black line. To cut that peacock out, now that would take skill I do not have. Nor do I think I will ever have or even aspire to. All right, so there we've got our basic cup cut out, but I'm going to come back and clean it up. Kind of like when the dentist, except nicer, even though it's really nice that they care, tries to get that filling flat in your mouth. Oh my gosh. Bite, bite, bite. You just keep cleaning it up. I'm sorry if that upset anybody. I know dentistry can. Here we go. See, there's another little spot to clean up. Now the question can come up, what do you do when you have something like this with a hole where you need to have something go not show from the paper? I, frankly, just go right inside. I cut through the handle. This would be a good time to use a craft knife on some projects when you have just a little tiny triangles of a space or just a little tiny something that needs a bit of cleanup. Okay, here I have, it's one of those situations where my line is to the right of my scissors. I'm not comfortable. I'm going to go around the other way. Then I flip it, and there we are. It's back so the blades aren't hiding it from me. It's kind of like making, I don't know how many right turns so that you get a left turn out of it. Gotta clean it back up. And then when you glue it together, you're going to glue it just really well together so that you pretty much won't see, except on very close inspection, your cut line. So there you go. So that's a pretty little cup. It looks like it was hand painted in Japan. How about if you have a solid image, stamped image that you want to do? Well, let's cut away the bulk. Again, this is a pretty simple letter. There's some rounded things to think about, but there's some straight lines, and then we also have these inside circles to cut out. So we just start and we go as close to very close to that edge as possible. We'll just do it really not very carefully. You want to make sure that you're using longer strokes so you don't get those little chunky angles. Unless you want chunky angles, then go for it. And we're always going to come back and clean up. There's two ways you can clean up on something like this that I can think of right now. You can go back and clean it up with the scissors, or you can come back and clean it up with some ink. Kind of have to look in two places at the same time. You have to look at where your scissors are actually squeezing to have the cut, and you have to look where you're going at the same time. And I just need to clean up right there. Yeah. Well, I didn't get it quite done, did I? Okay, one of the best fussy cutters I know, Sandy Boone. Takes, if she has something along this, like this with a black line, she does come along and take a black marker from the back side of the project and clean up the cut edge, which is actually usually white. And it cleans up that whole look. It's amazing. Same kind of thing on the inside here is that you would want to go ahead. The reason you do it from the back is because of this, so you don't have that kind of thing going on in the front. Same kind of thing with the cutting of the inside. I would just go right in there at the base somewhere and cut it out. Oh, cut it out. And then at the top, come in from the top, so that you always have a good vision of what you're doing. If you have any of those darn letters for initials, like B, D, O, XO, XO is what made me think of this also this weekend with Craft Roulette. XOXO, you had to cut out the insides of all those O's. And then do your trick with that and see how that looks so much better on this side than on the inside. You probably can't see that, but it does. So there's your tricks on that. So stamped images, no problem. How about papers? You could cut all this out and use it on another piece of paper. This was a 6x6 paper pad, but maybe you would like this for a corner of a 5x7 card, or you would like it on a corner of a scrapbook layout, or something more spectacular than just this little 6x6 paper. You could cut this out. You could do the same kind of thing with this as we did with the sticker, and cut it out separately, pop it up, and have it higher than the rest. So there's some reasons, like this little guy could be popped up very pretty. I'm not going to cut this out because there's just too many. This is too detailed. Try to avoid things that have teeny skinny lines like this if you're going to fussy cut into a paper like this. These little leaves have a tiny, tiny tooth to them. You can often get away with not worrying about those little tiny teeth and just do as straight a line as you can. It often turns out just fine. But again, this would be kind of hard. I wouldn't cut my eye teeth on this one. Also, while we talk about papers, tiny little images like this can be very fun to add to small little craft roulette projects where you need to have a little sign or something. You can cut out a little teeny tiny piece of image from a paper. This one's not so bad because it's nice and straight. And then you can have everybody look at it first and go, oh, she forgot oh no, there it is. So you can cut out teeny tiny images. This would be cute on a photo in a scrapbook also, just a little, or part of a cluster. So you can cut out little teeny tiny things. You can cut out words. I know I saw somebody give a lesson one time on something like this. They suggested taking a pencil and drawing a line outside that follows right along with the message or the sentiment before you cut. And that's probably a pretty good idea if you haven't fussy cut a lot. So then you can just cut along that line. You don't have to worry about anything except for erasing it and coming back and cleaning up any kind of rough edges. And that way you can stay pretty uniform in the distance from the sentiment, and really often look like you used a die cut. This also gives you more control than I think even a scan and cut would give you. Definitely cheaper. A pair of cutting scissors, definitely cheaper than a scan and cut, as far as I know about scan and cuts. But see how that's working out? So you can give yourself a little help with a pencil. Just don't write very hard. Here's something, maybe you don't like this outside. I know I don't. So you can come in and take a graphic card. Again, maybe it will help you use some of those. And just cut out the image on the graphic card. With this also, you could put a little black edge on there. It'd be a little tricky. Or if you had a marker that matched this red or a little bit darker color, you could edge it or even edge it with a blending tool. Such as something like this. And then it would cover up all those mistakes. But you can always go back and fix it up too. I think this would be, I would be much more likely to use that than this. So look for ways to use your things. I thought this one is another good example. I won't use this card per se, but if I did draw that around there, you'd have a really nice shape with a little bit of a frame around it, and I think I'd use it more. I did want to talk about this bad boy with all those little tiny lines and things. What do you do when you do that? Do you fussy cut around each one? No, not this cowgirl. I don't know about you. But you can use that same technique where you just go around the basic shapes. And this would be a great opportunity to use that pencil technique. And then come in and clean it up. That's what I do. Here's a sample of something that would be easy to cut. And leave a little bit of a white line. You can always leave that white line, come back and clean it and go next on the line. This little tiny camera is kind of thin-skinned though. His little lines aren't very bulky, so I don't think I would want to cut right on that line. I can get darn close. Close enough that if it were, it would get nervous to see that scissors that close if it had eyes. So you can just do something like that. And stick that in, this would be really cute in a mini album, a little junk journal. I will never use it otherwise. So these are things that you look at and you go, I really like it. It's really cute. I'll never use it. But if you cut it out, then maybe you're more likely to use it. You know what? Another thing that you can use with fussy cut images is for Happy Mail. And, you know, people are making these adorable little Happy Mail folios with little pockets of goodness in them and then mailing them off to other crafty friends. So this is a great way. Maybe you have never thought of a way to use something, but it may just like end up in somebody else's hands that can see a vision for it. Again, this is just the front of that pretty paper, and you could definitely cut out anything on there. But this would be like, I just looked at that and made me make that noise. The peacock feather, I would stay away from that like I would stay away from influenza. It just is something I wouldn't want to mess with. It's just too thin, but you can do the pencil technique. Also, I did want to mention that if you have something round and it's going to be harder to cut round, look and see if you have a die cut and use it. You know, that's why you bought them. This is a perfect example of a cut apart that you may want to trim up. That has a large white edge, so maybe you want to get a little closer when you cut. That's why you fussy cut. Here's another one. Maybe you don't want that wide of border. Just hold your breath and trim. I do find that when I fussy cut, sometimes I don't breathe very deeply. So when you are fussy cutting, that might be a tip too. Remember to breathe a little deeply every once in a while. You can always cut out things from magazines, especially if you're doing some junk journaling. You can do text. You can do little images. Isn't that pretty? You could make a card out of that. It's lovely. I don't think I'd want to make a card out of that. He's cute, I guess, but not lovely. There's an infected lymph node. I don't think I want that. Great opportunity to cut out some details here. These leaves are pretty. You could cut those leaves out. Oops, sorry about the microphone. You could cut those leaves out, or I don't think a fish. There's some pretty leaves. Those would be nice. Definitely cut worthy. Little birdie. That'd be great to cut out. So, magazines. I've got a whole pile of here. Now it's gotten so messy over here. Here's another little stamped image and a trick. So these are very deep V's. When you have something that has a deep V, I would go in both ways. There's also something else that I think you might like seeing. It's kind of a trick. You can use a marker on the outside. Flip it around so you can see where you are. A marker on the outside so that when you do cut it, you have a bit of a brown border, because then you can put it on brown paper and you won't have that white border. So you can come in on both sides. I'm not looking at that line, I'm looking at the border. I think I like doing it before I cut it. And then you can put it right there on the brown paper and it doesn't have that. And it looks like it's just the shapes and more than it does the, you can see it better on here. You would probably want to use gray on that side. So it blends in as the flower itself. It doesn't have any kind of border on it. So depending on what you want, a light blue is also very good for something like this. And that looks good. It actually looks quite good on white. Or if you don't have that, a light blue, thinking that doesn't work, a light gray is a great option too. It can help you cut it and it can help you matte. So that it looks pretty. The gray looks kind of like a shadow. And the blue can too. And then just cut in that gray or on that blue and use it like that. Another thing, I've got about 2 more things here. Another thing, this would be very hard to cut. And so I just pulled it out because I thought it would be it has so many curves and it has a lot of dents and this ways and that. So I would probably stay away from this, especially when I'm starting. And if I were going to do something like this, I would not want it on thick paper. It would be too hard. Here is a really, I think, a very fun project while you're practicing. Pull out some scrap paper and do some ink blending and a little bit of adding a little bit of texturing. The way I textured this was I took a ink pad on its edge and just added some color, did a little bit of stamping with some more hearts, and added some splatters with white paint. I used this nice fine point Sharpie. It's not the same as the ultra fine sharp point Sharpie, which looks like this, even though I use that for these kind of lines inside. But on the outside lines, I use this guy because you can do you can do shapes and you have plenty to practice on. You've got some pretty nice thick lines to practice on. This is just using a piece of copy paper, which is also good for practice. So, and you can make your shapes very simple. You don't have to worry so much about staying. It's just good practice. I thought it was just a great little way to practice. You could use clean copy paper. You could use your paper that you use underneath when you're stenciling or whatever. You could use some of those gel presses. Yes, all those pieces that you have. And then, so you cut it out, and then you cut them in and clean it up. Or you can use the black pen. And see, even if it's not drawn very well, you can cut it very well. So it covers up your mistakes. But this is a great thing to just practice with. You can do all sorts of colors. You can do really a plethora of shapes. Here I used some hearts. This is a fun thing to sit and just relax and do too while you're practicing. And pretty soon you'll get so good. You'll wonder why the heck you were afraid of it in the first place. There I am, not breathing. Just cut it, cut the bulk off, cut it as nicely as you can, then clean it up. You can always clean it up with a marker too. So if I don't want to go back and cut it more, on something like this, it's easy to come back and use your marker. And there you go. If by chance too you you can't tell what I was writing about by these little tiny little bits and pieces, but if you wanted to cover those up, any of the words that you don't like, you can just stamp over them or not cut them out because you've got so many. It doesn't matter. I did show off a little bit and use some, watercolor paper and cut some shapes, just some basic leaves. You could stamp those too. And then made a cute little card with it. This could go on top of a card, or it could go in a lunchbox, or tuck it in your purse in a safe place and then leave it behind for a friend or whatever. But I thought it turned out really well. Okie doke, let's see if I have everything there. On the leaves, on the leaves then, what do you do when you have a tiny line? I forgot to talk to you about that. So when you have a tiny line like a stem or bird feet or butterfly antennas, if you're using a butterfly and stamp, go ahead and stamp that butterfly, but just cut out the wings. Here's for instance, I stamped the butterfly and then just cut out the wing parts and stuck it on top of where the antenna come up. Same thing with bird legs. Anything that's if it's hard, fix it so you don't have to worry about it. Just make it easier. So do that also. And then, so if you want to do something with the leaves after you make them, just draw a stem. I don't know if this is going to dry because that's kind of resistance. And then you can have a pretty little heart flower. You could put some more hearts on there. It'd be real cute. And a few more leaves, and you'd have a cute little project for a junk journal, for a card front, for a scrapbook page embellishment, anything. There's just so much you can do. And you can improve your skills at the same time. You know, I think that I have pretty much covered everything. If you have some old dud blending pages or anything and the paper's not really thick, you can use those too. So some way to use those wonderful things that you've been working with. All right, I'm going to sign out because I got to get ready for a Zoom call with our patrons tonight. We do thank you so very much for joining us. I don't think I have anything else I can share with you tonight. Do look and see some of our other fundamentals. We have fundamentals on masking and heat embossing and several other things right here on Fun University's YouTube channel. If you do like stamps and tutorials, we do a tutorial every Monday for all patrons on our patron blog, and we also do them Tuesday nights on Fun University. If you haven't visited us on Craft Roulette, we'd love to have you there too at 6:30 on Friday evenings, Central Time, on our sister channel, all down in the description. It's a game show, and it's a ton of fun making cards. All right, I think I'm done. I do. Thank you so much for sitting through all this. This was a lot. I hope you got some kind of tidbit. Leave it down in the comments if you did get a tidbit, and I'd love to know what you didn't know, because I made some of it up. Kiss your brains. Thank you so much for being a part of my life, and we'll see you soon.